Hello everyone, and welcome to Week 4 of English 120. This week, we're going to be talking about two really great essays. The first one is called Argument, Critical Thinking, and Rationality. And that's where we're going to learn all about the argumentative essay. And that's found on pages 114 to 134 in the Conscious Reader. Secondly, we're also going to look at a second essay called What's Wrong with Cinderella? And that's by Peggy Orenstein. And that's found on pages 64 to 74 in the Conscious Reader. We'll have a discussion in our conversations, and we'll also post our journal prompt under your reflections. And you'll also complete the research lesson and quiz in comp class, locating research for various types of information needs. So let's start off by talking a little bit about writing argumentative essays. Don't forget, whenever you read something for this class, that you actively read the essay. What that involves is using the active reading checklist whenever you are reading something. So for example, before you read Argument, Critical Thinking, and Rationality by Joseph M. Williams and Gregory Collum, make sure you review who these authors are by reading about them, about their bios on page 114 at the beginning of the essay, and predict what the article will be about. Think about, what do you think an article titled Argument, Critical Thinking, and Rationality will be about? Most likely you'll be able to predict the correct answer to this one. You should also figure out when the article was published. And here's a big hint for this one. Look at the copyrights page on page 742. This will tell you the year that this article was first published. It's always important to know when something's published so you can contextualize it. Things are different every single year, and so it's important to know what's going on during the year that something's published in order to completely understand it. So let's talk a little bit about what they're talking about in this essay. They start off with telling us a little bit about what an argument is. I think in our culture, a lot of times we think an argument, when you think of it, you think of people fighting about something, that there has to be a winner, right? It's a conflict of some sort. But the original meaning of argument was to make clear, and the Latin word for silver is argentum, which comes from the same exact root. So as they say, what is clear often shines. So the whole goal when you have an argument on paper is it's a way to find a way to cooperate to solve tough problems. Critical thinking is an on-the-job skill. No matter what job you go into, you will need to learn how to think critically and to effectively argue with people who are your colleagues. There's many uses for argument. You can use it simply to convince others to think or do as you say, but you can also use argument to decide for yourself what you should think or do. Argument gives us a lot of things. It gives us patience to gather all of the information, to not make rash decisions. It gives us skepticism, to not accept something at face value without looking further into it. It gives us the logical ability to use facts as evidence, and it makes us seek facts that contradict our own conclusions, which means we have to be ready to change our minds. One thing that really helps you when you're figuring out your thoughts about an argument is to write it down. This will give you time to consider your argument. In a verbal debate, you're going to make really quick decisions on the fly. But when you write down your argument, it makes you really think it through, really fully examine it. It also makes you check your facts and logic, and helps you interact with others who've also thought about this topic. Now, argument involves a great deal of critical thinking. The root kritikos means to judge an idea by separating the evidence. That means separating the facts, the evidence, from your feelings. and or the feelings of others. Feelings alone cannot prove a thesis. Just because you feel passionately about something will not prove something to someone else. Good critics ask questions and they find answers through research. Good critics question themselves and their ideas. There are two different kinds of problems that people solve through argument. There are practical problems. That's when you are asked to do something, right? The practical problem of solving, how to find the cheapest desk or the most efficient desk to put in your new office. You could do research, you could analyze, you could really understand and find a solution to that problem if you did the research. Now, conceptual problems, these are larger problems that help us think about the world, but they aren't immediately solvable. These are larger problems like, for example, making a decision about, understanding why, understanding the meaning to life or something is a conceptual problem. It's a large-scale problem that is ultimately very hard to solve, and you use the conceptual consideration of that to understand all sorts of things. The form of a thoughtful argument. So there's an actual format that you use in order to form a thoughtful argument. You do this by making a claim. You stake a claim. Think of I like to think about the gold miners when I think about the word claim. Pretend like you found this piece of land that you feel is profitable. It's worth holding out other people from. You want to stake it off, and you make the claim. You stand out on this piece of paper, and you state what you want us to believe. What is it that you're going to defend? Then you want to give reasons. You want to make us believe what you're saying by giving us evidence. And remember, evidence is when people who have already, experts in the field, people who know something about this topic, are supporting what you're saying. You give us a reason, and then you say, so-and-so from Harvard, who studied this for 40 years, also agrees with you. And that really gives weight to your argument. It makes us believe the reason you've given. You want to know your intention for making the claim, and you want to understand the history of the topic and the counter-arguments. Now, the history of the topic is where you look at who are the experts about this topic, and what have they been saying? How long has this topic been debated? And what are the two sides or the multiple sides of this argument? You also want to know, once you have you've made your claim, so you've chosen which side of the argument you would like to defend, then you want to find out what the other side of the argument says. Those are the counter arguments, what other people have decided that disagrees with your claim, because you'll need to be able to refute those. There's several different ways that you appeal to your reader when you are forming an argument. There's logos, pathos, and ethos. Logos means logic, and that appeals to the reader using reason and evidence. Pathos appeals to the reader's emotions. This is where you use real life stories to appeal to our emotions. Ethos is our persona as a trustworthy, open-minded source. So let's think about this with a real scenario. So say I was arguing, I wanted to argue to you about the issue of gun violence. And I was going to, in my introduction, I might want to establish my ethos and why you should listen to me. And for me, I don't have a lot of background in gun violence. I certainly am interested in it, but I would want to explain that while I don't have experience in this area, I step to this argument open-minded and I've done a great deal of research to understand the current debate in our country on this topic. that would establish my ethos in the beginning of my paper. Now, I would want to gather both logos, logic, and pathos, emotion. Okay, emotional evidence and logical evidence. So I'd want to find statistics when I'm doing my research. I want to find statistics that support what I'm trying to prove about gun violence. Maybe I'll find the number of murders that have taken place using assault rifles, because I want to maybe focus on that in my paper. Or maybe I'll be focusing on school violence, so I'll find the number of shootings at schools that occurred, mass shootings at schools that occurred in the last 10 years in America. Pathos would be to actually tell the story of what happened in Newtown, last year. Give a real story of what happened that day. Give the story of a single teacher that tried to defend her students, or to try to save her students, or give the actual story of a single student who was killed, what the repercussions were for that action. Really putting a face on the problem so that you can completely connect to the story that I'm telling in my paper. Whenever you're writing a paper, though, you want to make sure that you're always telling the reader why they should care about what you're talking about. And it's important that you need to figure out how to answer this question, right? The best way to do so is to ask your fellow students, or to come visit me in my office hours and ask me. I'm here to help you sort through this kind of question. So if I were writing, going back to the gun violence example, if I were writing an essay on gun violence, I might have someone read it, especially someone who has a different opinion about gun violence than I do, and that way I can understand if what I am saying sounds biased, or I'm not putting enough, I'm not addressing the counter arguments enough. I'm not showing the reader why it's important to care throughout my essay. One really great way to get started on creating an argumentative essay, and I bet by now you've realized that our next essay we're going to be writing in this class is an argumentative essay. The next stage, but I'll tell you more about that next week. The next stage in writing an argumentative essay, after you've done your pre-writing and really thought through what are topics that you might be interested in writing about, what topics interest you and are arguable that you could discuss, that you could write a paper about. Once you find that, then you want to create an elevator story. So an elevator story is where you really map out your argument, and you can use this as a way to test your argument on other people. So the term elevator story comes from the idea that you want to be able to talk about this in the short amount of time that you would have, like in an elevator. Say you just have a minute with someone, but you want to be able to on the spot say the question or problem or argument that you're going to address, why that problem is important or interesting, your answer or solution, and the evidence you expect to find to support your answer. You want to be able to go boom, 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 and quickly say this to someone. So we use this as a way to really get our minds thinking through the idea of an argumentative problem, something that you want to research and understand. So if I were to write the elevator story for about gun violence, I might say the question or problem that my argument will address is are automatic weapons the cause of the availability of automatic weapons the cause of gun violence in American schools, and why that problem is important or interesting is because there's been to me is because, and that's always to you, this problem is interesting to me because there's been a number of school shootings, especially the most recent one where very young children were killed, and it made me very interested in this topic. the answer or solution, that's something you have to really pencil in what you think the answer or solution will be. And remember, when you go into an argument, this is something that may change as you do your research. So I think the answer to my question is yes, and the solution to the problem would be to ban those rifles. But I may do research, and if I go to my research with an open mind, I may find out that there are that there's been a lot of research to prove me otherwise. So as I do this research, I need to be very, very open to understanding both the history of this topic, because gun violence in America has a long history, and guns in America have a very long history, and I need to understand those before I started writing this paper. And I'd also need to understand the counter-arguments, the ideas that the other side presents, so that I really believe in my solution and my answer. The evidence that I expect to find to support my answer would be these would be newspaper articles about gun violence. These would be laws about gun violence. I would begin writing a list and then expand that list after I visit the library. Alright guys, so that's it about the argumentative essay this week. We're going to be talking more about it next week when I do introduce your assignment. This week though, we're going to practice doing an elevator story for our conversation this week. So what I'd like you to do is, after you read Peggy Orenstein's article, What's Wrong with Cinderella, I'd like you to tell me, what is Orenstein's elevator story? What is the question or problem that she's writing about? And why is the problem interesting or important to her, to Orenstein? What is the answer that she comes up with in her essay? And what evidence does she use to support what she's saying? Finally, after you've written her elevator story, I want you to tell me, and don't tell me this until the end, do you agree or disagree with her? Why or why not? After you've done your discussion forum and posted at least 3 responses to all of your classmates, then I'd like you to spend some time writing your journal entry for this week. This week we're going to be thinking about the argument, the essay on the argument that I just gave you a lecture about. I'd like you to answer all of the following questions in your response. Number 1, how do arguments help us think critically? Why do Williams and Kolob suggest that it is important to think of an argument as the search for a solution to a shared problem, as opposed to a battle that must be won over an opponent? Number 2, why are good arguments crucial for living and working with others whose views may differ from our own? And number 3, why is it important for mature critical thinkers to be willing to test their own personal beliefs and admit the possibility that they are wrong? How might one test his or her beliefs successfully? Finally, I'd like you to log into Comp Class this week and complete the following research lesson and quiz, locating research for various types of information needs. You must complete this by Sunday night at 11:55 p.m. in order to get credit for this particular research lesson and quiz. Alright guys, next week this is what we'll be working on. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me or stop by my office hours. I look forward to seeing you online.